This featured podcast is brought to you by Crusader.com, the world leader in premier cryptocurrency research, analysis, coin lists, coin rankings, ICO reviews, market updates. Welcome to the Crusader Podcast, brought to you by Crusader.com. My name is Drew. Thanks for tuning in this morning. So in today's episode, I want to discuss PoS versus PoW, which one's better, which one's more efficient, and which one could leave the crypto community forming major monopolies, can ruin the ecosystem of some coins and give too many people the power, and essentially end decentralization. Thanks for tuning in. Now, before we begin into the show, one thing I do want to talk about is how much I love crypto Twitter. Now, there's a lot of bullshit on there, not going to lie. And you got to sift through the kind of just blatant statements that really don't mean anything, like Bitcoin's going to revolutionize the world. And although those people get a lot of street cred, it's just kind of funny because they really don't provide any valuable information. But if you dive deeper, you can find some really interesting conversations and get into some good debates like I did last night. Now, I think it's important because we screw this up all the time, not just, on crypto Twitter, but as people in general. And we're more worried about being right than getting it right. And I heard that from a real good sports broadcaster that I've listened to for many years. And it rings so much truth that we focus so much on being the right person that we negate the fact of actually getting it right. So last night I'm in this debate about PoS, PoW, because the person I was arguing with called it a Ponzi scheme. Now, if you attack something and call it a Ponzi scheme, you would hope to give some evidence behind, how it's the structure of the system that makes it a Ponzi scheme. And as I asked him the question, he really didn't provide much information. And then he continued to ask me, well, why do I think it's not a Ponzi scheme? And after delivering about 5 or 6 tweets as my reason, and then asking him to kind of confirm why he keeps calling it that, I get blocked. And I just couldn't help but laugh because here I was putting the nail on a great conversation, a great debate, giving my final argument. And the fact that I was telling the truth and was right, he couldn't handle it and he blocked me. And this guy is trying to be a Bitcoin influencer. So I beg the question, are we more concerned about being right or are we more concerned about getting it right? And I do call a lot of people out on Twitter because I think it's important to beg the question and push what people are saying to see if it's valid or not. I was an educator for 7 years and I taught chemistry and physics. So I had this kind of innate tendency to want to question things. I hold no allegiance to any given coin. I just like investigating the technology. Now I invest in a lot of different stuff because I think it can make me money. But I think sometimes we swear these allegiances to these major altcoins and we think that we owe them something, and we make up truths, not truths. We make up things and we believe them to be true to kind of strengthen our ideology of that coin. And I think that's a foolish way to go about things. I think what's important, especially in this space, is that we continue to question things. And if what we believe in is not true, we're able to change our understanding and change our beliefs to match what's true. So I just couldn't help but laugh. It cracked me up. I very rarely get blocked. And like I said, I know I can be a jerk sometimes, but I'm just seeking the truth because sometimes we just believe everything that these strangers on the internet say, and we don't hold them accountable for maybe the bullshit that they're spreading. It just sounds good, so we retweet it, we like it. But always question stuff because at the end of the day, the most important thing is that we get things right and we're not so concerned with being right. Okay, so let's dive into our topic today. I did want to go over PoW versus PoS. What's the difference? What's the advantages? What's the disadvantages? And so if you're kind of new to this space, or maybe you've heard these words and you're not completely sure what they mean, PoW stands for proof of work. And this is what Bitcoin, Ethereum operate off of. There is talk of Ethereum switching over to PoS, but that's a topic for another day. So proof of work. And what proof of work is to keep the blockchain system going, miners have to block transactions. And so miners are competing with one another to be the miner who can block the transaction and receive the minted Bitcoin that comes out of it. So how a miner gets the opportunity to mine the block is every so often the system puts out a puzzle. Okay, this puzzle is basically a enormous string of numbers, and the miners basically just have to shoot in the dark and try to guess the right number, and they use computer systems to do this. But whoever, picks the winning number gets the right to mine the block. You mine the block, you're given Bitcoin as a reward. That's why there's incentive, and that incentive requires work and a ton of computing power, all right, to get the reward. And it's a great system because it prevents from double spending, because miners have to verify all the transactions, make sure they're valid. They have to put in computing energy, so it's competitive. And anytime you have competition, you really drive something. All right, it makes things better. Competition drives things to becoming great. All right, so you mix all this stuff together, it's quite a fantastic system. The major downside of it is it requires a lot of energy. So mining transactions requires a tremendous amount of data, and all that data requires tons of computing power. All right, and computing power is generated by electricity. Then to solve the puzzle requires an even more tremendous amount of computing power, because you want to pump as much computing power into solving that puzzle, because the first one to do it is the person that gets to mine the block, gets the block reward of 1 Bitcoin. All right, so that's where it starts eating up a lot of electricity. So PoS, proof of stake, runs on a little bit different. And proof of stake is you get to mine a percentage of the blocks based on how many coins you own. Okay, and so you basically eliminate the puzzle, and you allow miners, they don't have to put all that computing power into solving that puzzle. So now they can mine the block based on a proportion of the tokens they own. And the idea behind this is it eliminates the need for as much electricity, because the miners don't have to compete for this puzzle that takes all this computational computing power, right? It requires all this electricity. So it's a more energy efficient way of working the system, of keeping the system going, of verifying all the transactions. Now, it still requires work and energy. Okay, so one thing I was mentioning to that person last night before I got blocked, and I think it's what made him block me, is a lot of people think POW, POS are two separate things, and they're not that much different. I mean, they're a little bit different. Proof of work has a puzzle that miners all race to solve to get the reward. POS just removes that puzzle. So they're not wasting computing power trying to solve this puzzle. So let's say you own 1% of the coins, you get to mine 1% of the blocks. That's how it works. But at the end of the day, they still have to verify transactions, and transactions have a tremendous amount of data that requires a lot of electricity, and they have to verify all those to prevent double spending, because that's one of the last things you want to have happen with blockchain and cryptocurrencies. You can't have double spending, because then the system's not worth anything. All right, it's all counterfeit. So they still function the same, all right, in that capacity, but proof of work has a puzzle that requires more energy. Okay, so a lot of people they need to understand that, because they just think proof of stake is you just own coins and the system somehow automatically mines the blocks without using up energy or work. But that's not true. The miners still have to put up a tremendous amount of energy, and they also requires a lot of capital, because you got to own now you don't have to, but you got to own a large stake of the coins to be able to mine, to make enough money to make it rewarding for yourself. So you do have to put up capital. So at the end of the day, work and energy are being traded for a monetary reward. All right, one just requires less electricity, but it requires more, of a monetary investment. Now, pros and cons, okay? I like proof of work because I think competition is what makes things thrive. If you look at all species And the dominant species got that way because of competition. So just the laws of nature, I think, can make anything great through competition. And it really doesn't matter what it is, whether it's sport, whether it's academics, whether it's, companies, cryptocurrencies, whatever. I think competition's king. And that's one of the main reasons I like proof of work. Now, downside of proof of work is what happens when it no longer becomes profitable to mine. So Bitcoin halves, every so often. And at what point is there not enough Bitcoin in the system to make it worthwhile to mine? Now, I can't guarantee that's going to happen, but that's one of the downsides of proof of work, okay, is there's so few miners, and then they're just competing for, transaction costs in which people can drive down because they know that miners going to have to just block as many transactions as they can to turn a profit. So that's one of the downsides of proof of work. One of the downsides of proof of stake is, can you form monopolies? So if I'm able to accumulate a certain amount of token or mine a certain amount of transactions, if I can begin to accumulate enough coins, can I start damaging the system by having enough influence? So for example, if I own a major stake in a crypto, like 25% of a proof of stake crypto, what happens if I just decide to not mine the blocks? Now, I'm sure some systems are set up so that those blocks, mining that block could be passed to a different miner, but it just kind of makes you start to wonder if these proof of stake holders start generating a huge amount, a huge percentage of the pie right there, is can they really start controlling the crypto? So that's the downside of proof of stake, is you can have a couple of monopolies form, and then you start moving away from centralization or decentralization into a centralized entity there. So they both got pros and cons. Proof of work, competition. Proof of stake requires less energy. Like I said, I prefer proof of work, but there is a downside is it going to use so much energy that it no longer becomes profitable, especially if energy costs go up? So it'll be interesting to see. Now, one thing that could help alleviate this is obviously renewable energy sources. So somehow, if a mining company can use a lot of solar power, a lot of wind power, that would be really make it more efficient, make it more interesting. But at the end of the day, it's always good to have these conversations, have these good debates. Please contact us if you'd like us to cover any topic. We want to hear from you. If anything I said in this show was wrong, I would like to hear your feedback. I'm always open-minded to hear new opinions, not to mention getting into good debates with people on Twitter or over the microphone. Well, thanks for tuning in to the Crypto Podcast brought to you by Crusader.com. Check out our website. We're building a lot of blockchain applications. We're primarily focused on building solutions for businesses. Let us know if there's any applications you could use in your company. Contact us at Crusader.com. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Drew. Have a good morning.